Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk. You are listening to ethanol-free radio, high octane, no additives. And here to put a little fuel in the tank is a journalist who has been a guest on this program before. Michael Tracey leans left in his politics, and it's one of the reasons I like to have him on the program. Michael Tracey, met him at Governor Rick Perry's prayer event at Texas. Well, forget what it's called now, where the Houston Texans play. What's the name of that stadium, Michael? I don't recall either, Brian. Anyway, I just blanked on the name of the stadium, but that's where Michael and I met at Governor Rick Perry's prayer event about a year and a half ago, August of 2000 and whatever that was, 2011.
It's wherever the Houston Texans play.
Yeah, wherever the Houston Texans play, and they are knocking them dead this year. I mean, they're having a great season. Maybe the fact that place got prayed up may have something to do with that. Just kidding. Reliant Stadium. It's Reliant Stadium. Anyway, Michael is a journalist. He's based in New York. I've chatted with him, changed some direct messages with him about Sandy, and maybe, Michael, we can talk about that also for a second. But Michael's writing has appeared in The Nation, Mother Jones, Reason, The Guardian, which is a paper in the UK, I believe. That's the one we're talking about. The Washington Post, Religion Dispatch is also in Salon. So, Michael, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hey, Brian. How are you doing?
Doing good. And give us a quick update. You're there in New York. You've been following Hurricane Sandy. Just give us just a minute or two what the latest is there.
Well, you know what? I've actually been in New Jersey since the storm hit because I'm from New Jersey originally, and my family still lives here, so I've been staying with them since the storm hit just because there aren't that many national media here, or at least as many national media as there are in New York. So I figured I would be well-suited to kind of survey the damage here rather than being in New York where there's already a glut of media attention.
Now, I saw a story. I just couldn't believe it. There was a FEMA office or something, and they had a sign on the window that the FEMA office, this is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, was closed due to weather. Can that possibly be true?
I think I saw that as well, Brian. It's pretty shocking. I believe that was on Staten Island, which is also devastated, as you might know. But because a nor'easter actually hit this region yesterday, I mean, and by the way, I've been joking that it seems like God is not very happy with us here in the tri-state area lately.
And that's interesting to me, Michael. Let me interject here because it's interesting to me because you had Oliver Stone out there. We played the soundbite. He's saying the reason this storm hit us is because we have offended Gaia. You've got other environmentalists saying, hey, the reason we've done this is because we offended Mother Nature, capital M, capital N. You have Muslim imams out there saying that this has happened because Americans have offended Allah, and nobody in the left says anything. None of the journalists on the left side of the spectrum say a word. Then you've got a Jewish rabbi comes out and says maybe this is God trying to get our attention in New York because we have legalized same-sex marriage, and they land on him like a falling safe. What's up with that?
Well, Brian, I would reject all explanations of Sandy that appeal to supernatural. To the divine. I feel it was a freak weather occurrence that is not really explainable by anything other than just the wrath that Mother Nature can sometimes bring to us.
But see, I guess the question, Michael, let's say, I might disagree with you. I might say, like the founders did, look, when you have a natural catastrophe, it's an act of God. That's what they refer to it. And maybe it's God because he's the only one that can control the weather. Everybody talks about it. Nobody does anything about it except for God. It's under his sovereign control. That maybe he's trying to get our attention. Maybe it is some kind of an act of warning on his part. And the founding fathers said, look, when that happens, let's do some fasting and prayer and see if we can identify how we may have offended an almighty God. But the question I've got, Michael, is why do left-leaning journalists, why do they get all bent out of shape when somebody says that this could be an act of the Judeo-Christian God, but when the Muslims talk about it offending Allah, they don't say a word about it? How come they're so discriminatory about that?
That's a good question, Brian. I disagree with that double standard, and I've noticed it myself. I feel that people on the left or anywhere on the political spectrum ought to be equally critical of anyone who tries to assign supernatural explanations for naturally occurring events.
Well, speaking of
that would apply to Muslims or Christians.
Speaking of the supernatural, Michael, main reason I wanted to bring you on is chat for just a couple minutes about something you'd said to me in a direct message on Twitter, that you've sort of had the observation, because we're on the verge of a civil war in the GOP right now. In fact, I'm going to play a couple of clips and have you react to them. But you had this observation about how the GOP elites, what I call ruling class Republicans, how they tend to view and treat evangelicals. What are you seeing there?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think your listeners should be aware that when you speak to these GOP elites or the ruling class in private or at functions or something, they always evince great disdain for grassroots conservatives, in the South or in other areas that tend to be more heavily religious. And they're aware that they're only cynically using you guys. And again, I'm not personally a religious conservative. I don't regard myself as one, but I don't like how well-meaning people are manipulated. And I feel that's been the name of the game for the Republican Party, and there's no better evidence of that than the nomination of Mitt Romney. I mean, you know this well, Brian, but Mitt Romney was pro-life his entire adult life before he sought the Republican nomination. And
you mean pro-choice?
I'm sorry, pro-choice. Yes.
Yeah.
He was pro-choice for his entire adult life, and then he wanted religious conservatives to believe that he had a sudden revelation that happened to coincide with his decision to seek the Republican nomination. It always defied credulity, and I was just disappointed that many Christians fell for it.
Let me play a sound clip. Let's play clip 4, Rob. This is Steve Schmidt. This is the guy now, and we'll hear a montage here. Steve Schmidt first, and then we'll hear from David Gregory, NBC news anchor. And they're talking about this issue. And Steve Schmidt, now you don't get any more ruling class than Steve Schmidt. He's the guy that ran John McCain's campaign in 2008. And here's what he has to say about voices on conservative talk radio and what his fellow GOP elites ought to do with them and to them. Let's listen.
We've had some dust up lately with Rush Limbaugh. We had some tweets tonight by Donald Trump. By nature, they tend to be polemicists. I think that's a polite, accurate word. They tend to still get MSM attention and attention on the left and right. And your advice to those, especially in your party, is shut this down.
It's got to be shut down. It needs to be repudiated by serious leaders in the party. Look, conservatism is a serious governing philosophy, and it has served this country well, and it will serve this country well again in the future. But conservatism shouldn't be defined by fidelity to all of these crazy statements by talk radio personalities.
Some of the orthodoxy of the Republican Party about taxes, about regulation, about the role of government, what role government should play, particularly in a distressed economy, that some of those things have to change. It's not just about whether Romney was the right candidate or whether he made some tactical or strategic mistakes. It's about what the party believes, how it positions itself to an increasingly minority community that's our country right now. And that those kinds of adjustments have to be made, and they have been made. George W. Bush made those adjustments with regard to immigration reform and education. Jeb Bush made them. Marco Rubio. So there's a lot of people who are in a position to speak more to those communities, but they have to kind of work through some of this orthodoxy.
Now, Michael, I want you to respond to that. But what strikes me here, David Gregory, we know this guy is a card-carrying left-winger, and he sounds just like Steve Schmidt, who's a ruling class Republican. What's your take on those two sound bites?
Well, Steve Schmidt's been sort of on a crusade against the GOP ever since the 2008 campaign because they all blamed him for McCain's loss. So I would take whatever he says with a bit of a grain of salt, but I agree with his larger point in that the GOP, I would say subservience to folks like Rush Limbaugh is not helpful. And I would separate you out, for instance, Brian, from people like Rush Limbaugh. Obviously, your audience is growing, and I applaud you for that. But Rush Limbaugh has a far greater audience, and it seems like, and furthermore, I don't believe that Rush Limbaugh is a social conservative either, in his heart of hearts. I think he just knows that much of his audience is socially conservative, so he will repeat the platitudes that he thinks that they want to hear. But I don't think he's sincere about that, and I think this speaks to a larger problem with the Republican Party as it exists currently. Because Rush Limbaugh himself is an elite. I mean, he's the one who hosts all these events at his private estate for wealthy GOP figures, and that's where they all snicker at, evangelicals behind closed doors, because he has no actual affinity with you, Brian, I would say. I mean, I haven't spoken to him, but my strong sense is that he has no real affinity with you. He just, it's just a good business model for him.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I would probably contest that, Michael. I mean, I've never met Rush Limbaugh, probably never will, but I do read the transcript of his program virtually every night. He's the best talk show host that ever was or ever will be. I just enjoy reading the transcript to see what he did with the same information I was working with. I have no idea what he's done until I get home and call up the transcript, but that's kind of what I do after dinner. That's kind of my dessert, because I just enjoy seeing the way he handles issues. And I think, Michael, I think he's a genuine conservative. I mean, I think this is in his heart. You know, I may have a difference of opinion there, but I see Rush Limbaugh.
I think he's a genuine conservative, Brian, but I don't believe he's a genuine social conservative.
Yeah, I don't know. He's kind of soft on the homosexual agenda and some other things, but he's pretty strong on the pro-life issue and all of that. And so, I think maybe there's more affinity between Rush Limbaugh and me that you might think. In fact, Michael, the only difference between the main difference between me and Rush Limbaugh?
What is that?
$50 million a year. Other than that, there's some real affinity. But anyway, the thing. See, the thing that strikes me, and we're down to just about 30 seconds. But the thing that strikes me, I listen to Rush Limbaugh, and he articulates the things that David Gregory was talking about, that Steve Schmidt seems to be so unhappy about: smaller government, lower regulations, lower taxes. So it seems to me that a guy like Rush Limbaugh, another conservative talk show host, they actually articulate conservatism, and that's what ruling class Republicans don't like.
No, I think ruling class Republicans are just fine with Rush Limbaugh, because he gins up support at the conservative grassroots who are going to turn out and vote for Republicans, even if Republicans at least disrespect the wishes of grassroots social conservatives like your audience. Mitt Romney, in the general election campaign, reneged on his pledge to support a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage, and he had signed a pledge to support that in the Republican primary. But then, of course, because he was a very cynical person, in my view, he reneged on it just like that, because I don't think
Michael, I'm sorry.
Your contribution.
Michael, I hate to interrupt. I'm up against a hard break. Can't do anything about it. I want to thank you for coming on. Appreciate your observations. Always good to have you on. Michael Tracey, journalist. Back in 2.
Christmas is on the way, and once again, in a time when many want to remove